right, hi everybody. I'm Nolan Hoffman. Thanks for joining us tonight for East Texas in Focus. Let's get started with our topic. And tonight we're going to focus on protecting our state's natural resources, from the water beneath our feet to the massive data centers powering our digital world. Texas lawmakers taking a closer look at how rapid growth can impact our land. It's an issue that we have been following here in our newsroom for months. Ahead of next year's Texas legislative session this week, the Texas House Natural Resources Committee holding a hearing on groundwater water supply and the increasing demands being placed on Texas infrastructure. Coming up in just a little bit, we hear from East Texas State Rep Cody Harris, the chairman of that committee, to talk about what lawmakers learned, the challenges ahead, and what the expansion of these data centers could mean for the future of Texas water. During the 10 hours of testimony, it didn't take long for concerns to surface there after the first mention of data centers. Before we begin, Rachel Davis walks through the main data center water concerns right now, whether Texas has enough of it to keep up with this rapid growth we're seeing.
Bad data, bad study and everything, right?
Tuesday, a State House committee took a deep dive into Texas water concerns, including the growing wave of data centers looking to plant roots in the Lone Star State.
The issue of having an explosion of potential data centers is a supply and demand response.
State Representative Trent Ashby of Lufkin echoing concerns he's heard across East Texas.
How that would impact those citizens that live in those counties, as well as folks up and down the aquifer.
Ashby says the concern is simple. Water isn't just another resource. It's the lifeblood of rural communities, and some fear large data centers could drain it faster than it can be replenished. Lawmakers warn that heavy water use coupled with limited oversight could leave some communities vulnerable.
If you're in a county with a data center or a proposed data center, and there is no GCD, there is no requirement or obstacle, if you're a data center, to overcome to pump as much groundwater as you want.
The Texas Water Development Board says it's working to better understand the impact. The agency surveyed industrial facilities, including 341 data centers, but so far only 17% have responded.
Yeah, I mean, that is a terrible response rate.
For some lawmakers, it's like trying to balance a checkbook without seeing most of the numbers, questioning whether the state can build a reliable water plan with so many gaps in the data.
Many facilities, there's low response rates across the board. There can be. And when we don't get a response, we do whatever we can to fill in those gaps. We'll estimate around it.
But some representatives say estimates aren't enough when the resource at stake is water, calling for more research and better data before demand outpaces supply.
All right, that was Rachel Davis with that report. So during our conversation with State Rep Harris from Palestine, he explained to us the current concerns at the state level and the oversight gaps that currently exist as well. Here's what he had to tell us.
Cody, thanks again for doing this. I appreciate it. So we were following that hearing this week, your committee hearing in the parts of East Texas without groundwater districts, a data center could pump as much water as it wants for the most part. How much does that concern you right now? You look into these water situations a lot. Does Texas also have a gap in the law right now when it comes with these data centers?
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question and something that we dove into during the committee hearing. But I really want to spend more time. In the coming months, I'm going to actually be having a field hearing in East Texas on groundwater. And we're going to try to include data centers in that as well and their water usage. But especially in the northeast part of East Texas, where there are no groundwater conservation districts, those are the areas where the rule of capture without any restriction whatsoever applies on its face. So theoretically, anybody could come in and buy a little tract of land, put as big of a water well as they can afford on there, and pump as much water as they can possibly pump without any restriction whatsoever, without their neighbor being able to sue them for a takings of that water underneath them. So it's a major concern for me as we've spent the last year and a half or two looking into our aquifers in East Texas, our groundwater availability, and what we need to do to make sure that we're all protected.
Yeah, with these data centers, it's a really big topic here in East Texas, across the state. If you live here in our area, rely on a well, should you be worried about competing with these large data centers for water in the near future?
If you're not inside of a groundwater conservation district, absolutely. I think that is a concern. But I don't think it's just data centers that you should be concerned about and their water usage. Because as we saw and we heard in the testimony, The majority of the data centers who have actually been built in Texas are using closed loop systems. They're doing things what I would say is the right way. The ones that are not doing it the right way, I think, are what I call the wildcatter developers, and they're not the actual operators or the customers of the data centers like Facebook or Google or Amazon or these big guys. They're the ones who are going out there and trying to buy a tract of land, trying to get in the line for electricity allocation, and then they go package that and turn around and try to sell this project to a data center customer, like Facebook or Amazon or Google. And so those are the ones that we're having the most trouble with, and they're the ones who we hear about in our communities where there's 8 or 9 new data centers coming in. Well, actually, those are probably just developers trying to become a data center, and a lot of them are largely paper tigers, in my opinion.
State planners also telling your committee they're relying on estimates now because many facilities aren't reporting, I guess, the exact water use. How big of a problem is that for planning Texas' future with all the water issues we're seeing in some parts of Texas right now?
That to me is one of the main things that came out of the committee hearing, and seeing that for the Texas Water Development Board, who sent out hundreds of surveys to these data center companies and only got a 17% response rate, or the Public Utility Commission, who only got less than 30 responses from the data center industry. And so that shouldn't be an option, in my opinion. You shouldn't be able to not tell the state and the people of Texas how much water you think you're going to use in their area. And so, that's immediately top of list when we get back to the legislative session, is to make disclosure of the use of our resources mandatory before anything gets built.
Yeah, the state seems optimistic, I think, for the most part, about what these data centers can provide when it's all said and done. But would you say we're risking long-term water supply needs for short-term economic growth if we don't find the right kind of balance? I know that's what you're trying to do right now.
That's right. That's exactly what we're trying to do, is find the right balance. And I think we can do that. I think we've got the time to get there. Like I said, there's so many hundreds of wildcatter developers who are trying to make this happen. But with the intensity of scrutiny that we have on them right now from both the public perspective and the state perspective, I think we're going to be able to put the guardrails necessary around data centers to make sure that we can find that balance and provide the benefit. Because, I mean, if a big data center comes into your county, there isn't a need for tax abatements on those guys or for subsidies from your local government. And so the tax base that they bring in could really help eliminate property taxes for homeowners in those local counties at the county and possibly city and school district levels of property taxes.
With the amount that's popping up, I think I've seen some reports where it's like there's like 300 plus that have been proposed across the entire state of Texas. Are you concerned about that number right now? I know not all these companies are the same, what they're trying to do, but is that an alarming number? And are they proposing this stuff too fast, would you say?
It was an alarming number until I understood what that number represented. And the vast majority are the wildcatter developers who are trying to become a data center. In reality, we're only going to see a percentage of that number that are out there, from my understanding, from what we discovered in the testimony last week, like I said, or the other day. The majority of these guys are paper tigers that won't ever actually turn into a built data center.
I wanted to ask you this. Is the state's water plan keeping up with how fast these data centers are being proposed? Like I said, I think it's been like 300 plus. Or would you say is policy still lagging behind right now?
I think what we're seeing is that our state agencies are trying to collect the data necessary to effectively plan, but they lack the teeth to require the data being provided to them. So that's where the policy lags. Is that we I guess the legislature in past years have been reluctant to force disclosure of certain information, but now to me it's obvious that we're in a situation where that's not a luxury anymore, and disclosure of the utilization of groundwater, utilization of electricity, and the sources of both of those things should be mandatorily disclosed.
And also during the meeting, several county level lawmakers also asked the state government to give local governments more power to block those data centers. All right, that's a good start tonight. When we come back with East Texas in Focus, much more with Representative Harris and the concerns East Texans are expressing when it comes to data centers in their backyards. We'll be right back. Welcome back tonight with the onslaught of data center proposals popping up across Texas. New polling there shows the majority of Texans do not want them in their backyard. The University of Texas and Texas Politics Project survey finds 56% of Texans are against data centers being built in their community. In rural areas where people tend to covet their peace and quiet even higher, the opposition is even higher, which unfortunately is where most of these proposed AI data center projects are located. These findings come as state and local leaders continue to push for tougher oversight of data centers this week from what we just saw in Austin, including their energy use, water demands, and tax breaks. State Rep Cody Harris from Palestine telling us that he, along with other state lawmakers, are paying close attention to the concerns from Texans and are working to put in place processes to ease some of those fears. Here's what he had to tell me.
A lot of fear. A lot of people are very scared about them, and rightfully so. When you have data center developers who are coming into our East Texas areas, our counties and our communities, and some of them trying to locate right beside a neighborhood, a residential neighborhood, and they refuse to do community town halls. They refuse to meet with the commissioner's court, and then they refuse to come provide testimony in a hearing in Austin to answer questions. Texans are rightfully upset about those types of actors when they refuse to answer questions. So of course there's going to be lots of skepticism about them. But I do think that we have a short window before session gets here to make sure that we understand what's going on, start to understand how this is unfolding, and put the guardrails in place to where this can be a net benefit to the people of East Texas, where the people of East Texas have a say in the locations of some data centers. And we're going to get that problem solved, and I have no doubt about that.
From what you gather, why do you think these companies are not providing the oversight needed right now to maybe boost confidence in what they're trying to do?
It kind of ties back to what we were talking about earlier, and why they won't provide that data is they don't really know yet, because they're an idea on paper trying to become a data center, they've got the land, they're trying to get the electricity, and then so what I've heard is the developers are trying to blame it on the actual end user, to say for the end user to tell the developer what type of a water system they want to utilize. So whether that's closed loop or straight running through evaporative cooling, and so there's I don't think that should be an option, right? If you're going to develop a data center, you need to tell us exactly what it's going to look like, exactly how much water you're going to use, where the water is going to come from, where you should bring, as Governor Abbott has said, you should bring your own electricity with you and not cause electricity rates for your neighbors to go up. And so those are things that I think we can accomplish in the coming months, next session especially. And with the amount of scrutiny that's on that, I think we can see legislation passed that goes into effect immediately once it passes both chambers with a certain threshold, so that we're not waiting a year out for these laws to go into effect.
What you just said about Governor Abbott with the data centers, they should bring their own power and reuse their own water as well. How realistic is that, especially in rural East Texas, with what Governor Abbott has said about these data centers?
Bringing your own water in East Texas, that might be a hard task to accomplish, but in far west Texas, where we have produced water from the oil and gas industry, I think it actually is a real possibility. So this is a problem that we've been trying to solve for several years. The oil and gas industry, of course, provides part of the largest economic engine for our state. And for every barrel of oil produced in the Permian Basin, you have 2 to 3 barrels or more of water that's produced out of that well at the same time. And this water is non-potable, it's salty, there's chemicals in it. So for years, all they've been able to do is inject that wastewater, that produced water, into an injection well. So we created in the legislature the Produced Water Consortium to figure out a way to clean this water and put it to use in an industrial application. Well, here's the perfect example right here of where an industrial application could help solve part of this problem for Texas and the oil and gas industry, where these data centers could locate or pump in or truck in the cleaned produced water and use that in their closed loop system instead of our fresh groundwater here in East Texas.
How long could it take with you guys, lawmakers, and these data centers for what they want to do for everybody to get on the right footing, to understand what's happening, regulate it properly, from what you guys are trying to do? How long could that take before everybody knows what's going on, and then maybe these data centers could come, but at the right cost for Texans, communities out there like East Texans, from what we've seen with their concerns?
Yes, a great question. So right now we're in what we call the interim, but between legislative sessions. So from now until the second Tuesday in January, when we all get sworn in again, and this coming January is when the next legislative session starts. And so from there, it's a few weeks before bills start being heard in committees and they begin making their way through the two chambers and making their way to the governor's desk. So once we get to January, it's just a couple of months before we can have these guardrails in place and in effect.
All right, when we come back tonight, what do the construction of those data centers have to do with our country's technology race with China? We're going to find that out after the break here tonight. Welcome back tonight. One point brought up during that Natural Resources Committee hearing in Austin this week was how not enough building of these data centers could put the United States behind in the artificial intelligence race with China. State lawmakers say it is now about finding the balance between possible national security concerns and protecting our land, water, and peace here at home in the States.
What would be your number one goal right now for you and your lawmakers with these AI data centers and protecting water here across Texas?
For right now, my number one priority is making sure that we get accurate information and that the people of Texas get accurate information. I had a witness come testify on Tuesday in the hearing named Michael Lucci from State Armor, who is an expert in Chinese government interference and things going on in the United States. And he really exposed how the Chinese Communist Party is absolutely getting involved in trying to throw gasoline on the fire where we have legitimate concerns of people, of water usage, of electricity usage, but the CCP is coming in and inserting incorrect information and trying to ignite this further, where we fight each other so that they can win this race at our expense. And so filtering through the noise, I think, is probably one of my priorities right now, to discover what the facts on the ground actually are, so that when we get to the legislative session and we start making new law that will all Texans will be bound to, that we're making smart decisions and making new statute and law that everyone has to follow, that won't harm the next generation of Texans. And so, I think that should be our goal, right? As an elected representative of people, the last thing I need to do is have a knee-jerk reaction to pretty much anything. I need to find out the facts. That's why when we had the whole uproar here in Anderson and Henderson counties over the mass pumping of groundwater being proposed, we held an 11-hour hearing and dug into it to find out exactly what was going on. Then we got to a special session and legislation was filed to try to stop it for a while we figured out how to correct the area. So that's the main focus between now and January. Then when January gets here, we file the legislation and we put the proper guardrails around the data centers. And I think that can be accomplished.
And then just as a whole, when it comes with the water issues that we've seen in East Texas or protecting that from other places across Texas. What else are you looking for in this next legislative session to possibly accomplish?
This is incredibly important. Finding a way to protect the areas that don't have a groundwater conservation district is of utmost importance to me. That's where I see the greatest threat to our aquifers and to our groundwater is for the people who live in the majority of Northeast Texas without a groundwater conservation district, but with an abundance of groundwater. The other thing that I think is critically important is making sure that we have accurate data on how much groundwater is underneath us, and that's throughout the entire state of Texas. For years and years, we've gone along with just having spotty wells that we can check the level of the aquifer and try to keep track and make a guesstimate of how much water might be under there. That's no longer good enough. The state of Texas is in need of water, of fresh water, and before we start allowing any production of groundwater, we need to make sure we have a very accurate understanding of how much groundwater is actually underneath us. And so those are the types of things that I'm going to be largely focused on this next session, along with making sure that groundwater conservation districts have the resources and the tools that they need to effectively manage the groundwater underneath them. Because what happens sometimes is you have a groundwater conservation district who has a very weak funding mechanism, a low revenue stream. And so you can have large billion-dollar water corporations come in and try to sue them into bankruptcy and out of existence. And that doesn't ever need to happen. So providing some sort of a liability protection to groundwater conservation districts to effectively manage our groundwater, those are the big priorities for me moving into next session.
All right, we want to thank Representative Harris for his time and for that interview there on that important topic. When we come back here tonight, closing thoughts on this week's important topic. We'll be right back. So as Texas continues to grow, so will the demand for water, electricity, and the land that supports both of that. This week's hearing made one thing clear: data centers may help power our future, but they also raise some important questions about the resources that have sustained Texas for generations. Those questions are expected to take center stage when lawmakers, of course, return to Austin for the next legislative session in early 2027 as they weigh economic growth against the long-term responsibility of protecting our state's water supply. The decisions made in the months ahead won't just shape the next few years, they could help define the future of our communities for decades to come. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. We'll continue to put this issue in focus and its impact across East Texas. Have a great Saturday, everybody.